This story happened to me a few years ago, back in 2001, when I worked night shifts at a gas station on a highway outside Houston, Texas. I always drove my car to work. The gas station was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded only by roads and wilderness. Although I worked the night shift, I often had customers, mostly truck drivers or regular cars stopping to get gas, buy food, or use the station's restroom. That's why I never felt alone. That night, I was working as usual, charging a customer for some snacks when a man walked in. He looked about 35 years old, very tall and bulky. He walked toward the back aisles where the refrigerators were, as if he were choosing a drink. I finished ringing up the previous customer, who left, and then it was just that man and me in the gas station. I was waiting for him to come to the counter to pay, but as soon as the other customer left, the man turned to look at me from the back of the aisle. He stared at me with eyes full of rage and a small, cynical smile. I asked him in English if something was wrong, but he began walking slowly toward the counter, never taking his eyes off me. The closer he got, the more I noticed that his hands were covered in blood, as were parts of his face. I backed away slowly, walking backward without taking my eyes off him because I knew his intentions were bad. He wanted to hurt me. I reached the door and ran to my car, but he had already slashed the tires. Back then, cell phones weren't common, so any calls had to be made from the store phone. I didn't know what to do. I just prayed for a car to pull up for gas so someone could help me, but no one passed by on the road. Suddenly, I saw the man step out of the store and start walking in my direction. He was staring right at me with that mocking smile, like he was hunting me. I ran to the back of the gas station, hoping the back door would be open so I could get inside and call the police, but it was locked. I had secured it with a padlock myself a few hours earlier. I circled back to the front, only to see the lifeless body of a man lying on the ground, stripped of his clothes. I was paralyzed with shock. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life. Desperately, I looked around to see where the man was, but I had lost sight of him. I carefully moved toward the front of the store to see if he was there, but I didn't see anyone. Summoning courage, I ran to the door, quickly entered, and made sure he wasn't inside. Luckily, he wasn't. I quickly locked the main door and ran to the phone to call the police, but the man had cut the phone lines. I was stranded. My only option was to wait for someone to arrive and help me. I looked out the store's large window, and there he was, standing about 4 meters from the entrance, watching me, never taking his eyes off me. His smile grew wider and wider, as if he were enjoying trapping me and knowing I couldn't call for help. No help came. That's how we stayed for half an hour. I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to leave, to run, but I was trapped. It seemed deliberate that no one came to the station. A few cars passed on the highway, but I couldn't go out and flag them down. I was locked inside the store, wondering if I would survive. Desperate, I decided to grab a pair of scissors from the counter and try to run as fast as I could. I knew that man would kill me anyway. I had to fight. I gathered my courage, unlocked the door, and stepped outside. The man looked at me and smiled with a giant, sinister grin, revealing yellow, almost rotten teeth, never taking his eyes off me. I took a slow step forward to see how he would react. The man took 2 steps toward me, savoring the situation. At that moment, I froze, unsure of how to react, and decided to run back inside the store and lock myself in again. The man kept walking forward until he was just 2 steps from the store's door. I couldn't handle the psychological torment anymore. I yelled, "What do you want? What do you want from me?" But I got no answer, just a macabre smile. Then he pulled out a giant knife and began scratching the glass door with it. He was enjoying playing with my mind, tormenting me before killing me. I stood at the back of the store, my nerves shattered, holding those tiny scissors to defend myself in case he got in, though I knew they would be utterly useless. The man was almost twice my size and had a weapon. I stood no chance against him. It was clear he was a psychopath, someone who had taken lives before. Suddenly, I saw a car pull up to the gas pumps. A man got out, probably to buy gas. The man outside turned to look at him, and I tried to warn the customer. I shouted with all my might for him to stay away, to run. But when the man saw me, it was already too late. As the customer tried to run, the man with the knife caught up to him, and you can imagine what happened next. I was in shock, unable to move, as I watched the horror unfold. The man then dragged the customer's body, to the back of the store. I know I should have run at that moment, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. I was frozen. Tears streamed down my face, but I couldn't move. I just watched. Then the man went to the customer's car, parked it next to mine, and slashed the tires as well. Afterward, he stood in front of the store again, watching me. His smile grew larger and larger. His eyes were piercing. There was nothing but pure malice in them. No soul, no humanity, just evil. I slowly began to regain control of my body. I knew I had to fight for my life or end up like those two people. I decided to run out the back door. I knew that as soon as he saw me running, he would follow, so I had to be as fast as possible. I grabbed the scissors and ran out the back without hesitation. I opened the door and ran as fast as I could toward the woods. I heard the man's heavy footsteps behind me, chasing me like a predator hunts its prey. The terror and adrenaline I felt at that moment are indescribable. The man was closing in on me, just 2 steps away, when I suddenly saw lights. In the distance, I saw the flashing lights of a police car. Suddenly, I stopped hearing the man's footsteps. I turned around, and he was gone, lost in the woods. I kept running and waving at the patrol car until they saw me and stopped. I told them everything I could, although my English wasn't very good. They put me in the car and drove me back to the station. I was still terrified and didn't want to get out, so I stayed in the car while they checked the area. They didn't find the man, only the bodies he had left behind the gas station. They called for backup, and soon more police and ambulances arrived. Later, they took me to give a statement and showed me a photo, asking if the man in the picture was the one who had done all that. I said yes, it was him. They told me he was an escaped inmate from a nearby asylum, and that he was extremely dangerous, a psychopath who lacked empathy and enjoyed hunting his victims. I broke down crying. I still couldn't believe I had survived, that he was just 2 steps away from catching me. If it hadn't been for that patrol car, who knows what would have happened. I went home with severe trauma. 2 days later, I found out they had caught him and sent him to a maximum security prison. Despite this, I kept dreaming about him every night. I saw him standing outside my house, watching me. I went to therapy for years, and although it helped a lot, it's something that scarred me for life. I know my story isn't about ghosts, but believe me, the living are far more dangerous than the dead. My name is Alfonso, and in my youth, I worked as a cashier at a 24-hour gas station. My shift was a night shift since I've always been a night owl. The gas station was at the entrance of a small town about 40 minutes from the city where I lived. After several months working there, I already knew many people in the town, and most of them treated me warmly. One night, I arrived for my shift as usual, at 10 o'clock sharp. Everything was calm. I was stocking soda cans in the refrigerators when, suddenly, I heard footsteps coming from the storage room at the end of a short hallway. I stayed quiet to listen more carefully, thinking I had imagined it, but the footsteps came again, louder this time. I stood up and walked toward the storage room. I opened the door, turned on the light, and looked around, but no one was there. I went back to my task, trying not to give it too much thought. However, shortly after, I heard the footsteps again, this time accompanied by the laughter of children. I quickly stood up and ran to the storage room, but once again, the place was empty. By that point, I was confused. I decided to keep working, though I couldn't ignore what was happening. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the storage room door, as if someone had punched it. That was the last straw for my patience. I peered into the hallway and shouted, "Who's there? I'm calling the police." There was no response. What I heard next were children's laughter, as if they were mocking me. At that moment, a local woman, Donna Elena, walked into the store. She saw me standing in the hallway and asked me what was going on. I told her what had happened, and calmly, she replied, "Yes, son, I know strange things happen here, and they'll never stop. This place has a dark history." Intrigued, I asked her what she meant. She told me that 10 years ago, in that very spot, there used to be the house of a former governor of the town. It was a big, beautiful house where he lived with his wife and their 2 7-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. The governor's wife was diagnosed with schizophrenia, And although she was undergoing treatment, she continued living at home. One night, while her husband was away for work, she had an episode and, in a delusional state, ended the lives of her children. When the governor returned, he found the horrifying scene. The woman was committed to a psychiatric hospital, and the house remained abandoned for years. Eventually, a businessman bought the land and built the gas station. Donna Elena added that I wasn't the only employee who had experienced strange occurrences, especially during the night shift. She advised me to carry a rosary and pray if anything strange happened again. That early morning, around 3 a.m., the footsteps returned to the storage room. Shortly after, even louder bangs echoed on the door, this time 3 consecutive ones. I walked toward the hallway and saw the doorknob moving, as if someone inside was trying to open it. I shouted, "That's enough! Get out of here!" Everything went silent. I thought it was over, but suddenly the lights went out throughout the store. I ran to the entrance and grabbed a flashlight. I tried to go outside to check the fuse box, but the main door was stuck. I used my keys, but they didn't work. I was trapped. Desperate, I went back to the hallway with the flashlight. Right in front of my eyes, the storage room door slowly opened, emitting a terrifying creak. From inside came whispers and the laughter of children. Terrified, I turned off the flashlight and hid in the last aisle of the store, pressing my back against the wall. I closed my eyes tightly, praying the few prayers I could remember. Suddenly, I felt an icy breath near my ear. I dropped the flashlight and ran through the aisles, shouting for them to leave me alone. I sat on the floor, covering my face, as the laughter and whispers surrounded me. Then, I felt a small, cold hand touch my own and another on my shoulder. It was the most terrifying sensation of my life. Out of nowhere, someone knocked on the store's door. Miraculously, the lights came back on, and the place fell silent. I got up and ran to the door. It was a truck driver who wanted to fill up on gas and buy some cigarettes. When I unlocked the door, it opened as if nothing had ever been wrong. The man asked if I was okay. I thanked him for arriving at that moment, though he seemed confused by my reaction. After assisting him, I closed the store and went straight to Donna Elena's house. I told her what had happened, and she hugged me. She said I shouldn't feel guilty or ashamed, that many before me had experienced similar things. That same morning, I handed in my resignation. I never went back to the gas station, nor did I find out what happened to that place, but I'm sure those souls remain there, scaring away anyone who dares to stay alone at night. My name is Gustavo. I used to work as a gas station attendant on the outskirts of my city. My shift was at night because I attended university during the day. The gas station was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded only by wilderness. It was a quiet place. At night, there were almost no customers. On average, I served 5 people during the entire shift. I liked that because I could focus on my tasks without many distractions. I was never afraid of being alone, but one night changed everything. It was 2 a.m., and I was finishing some school notes with my headphones on when suddenly a woman walked in. She looked very well dressed, elegantly so, which immediately caught my attention. She walked straight to the back of the aisle, and I could see her through the security mirror. She stood there looking outside, doing absolutely nothing. I took off my headphones, ready to assist her when she came to the counter, but she didn't move from her spot for several minutes. It was a strange situation. I worked up the courage to ask her if she needed help, but she didn't respond. At that moment, something didn't feel right. I left the counter and walked toward where she was. The woman was still standing at the back, motionless, staring outside. That's when I noticed something odd. She was barefoot. Her feet were dirty and injured, which sharply contrasted with her elegant appearance. I asked her again if she needed help, but once again, no answer. I stepped back and looked outside, thinking someone else might have arrived with her. But there was no one. Outside, there wasn't a single car parked. Everything was deserted. I wondered how she had gotten there, since it was impossible to walk from the city. The gas station was a 30-minute drive away. My unease grew. I asked her how she had arrived, if someone had brought her, But once more, no answer. I was getting increasingly nervous. I didn't know how to handle the situation, so I told her she needed to leave if she wasn't going to buy anything. For the first time, the woman turned to look at me. Her eyes reflected an indescribable fear. Almost in a whisper, she said, "He's coming for me." I asked her who she meant and if I should call the police, but she didn't answer. She just began to cry uncontrollably, staring outside with inexplicable terror. I locked the door immediately and called emergency services. I explained what was happening, and the operator said they would send a patrol, but it would take at least 20 minutes to get there since the gas station was so far away. I hung up and told the woman to stay calm, that the police were on their way. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on the doors and checked the external cameras, fearing that someone might actually be after her. I grabbed a baseball bat that I always kept on hand in case I needed to defend myself. Working in that place at night could lead to dangerous situations like robberies or troublesome people. I went outside to check around the gas station. There was no one outside, only the characteristic hum of a desolate night. Absolute silence. I went back into the store, but the woman was no longer there. I searched the entire gas station, the storage room, the bathrooms, and other corners. It was impossible for her to have left without me noticing. I was only outside for a few seconds. I decided to check the security camera recordings, and what I saw left me frozen. In the footage, there was a figure in a black cloak standing outside the window. Its face and body couldn't be distinguished, but it had been there since the moment the woman entered the store. It remained there while I went outside to check. In the video, you could see how I walked right past the figure, but I hadn't seen it at the time. Then, when I headed to the back of the store, the figure started to move away and disappeared into the darkness. I saved the video to show it to the police, as it was something difficult to explain or believe. At that moment, a patrol arrived, which surprised me because only 5 minutes had passed since I made the call. The officers told me they were nearby because, just 2 kilometers from the gas station, there had been a car accident. A woman had lost her life. I didn't think much of it at the time and told them what had happened. I showed them the videos, but they said that if the woman was no longer there and no crime had been committed, there wasn't much they could do. They searched the area and found nothing. They advised me to lock the doors and call again if anything strange happened. When my shift ended in the morning, I went home. I showered and lay down to rest for a while before going to school. While checking my phone, I saw the news about the accident, a collision between a car and a trailer. The woman in the car had died minutes after the impact. When I saw the photo of the victim, a chill ran down my spine. It was the same woman who had been in the store that night. She had arrived minutes after the accident. I couldn't think of anything other than the black figure I saw on the cameras. I'm convinced it was death, coming for her. The woman tried to hide, fighting for her life, but in the end, she lost the battle. To this day, that event still haunts me and follows me in my nightmares.